and welcome to another Sacred Wisdom podcast with Chris Clifford and myself, Becky Parks. And today we have a special guest, Tiana. Hi, Tiana.
Hello.
So Tiana is an aspiring journalist who is actively working to change the paradigm of politics for the younger generation, and her main aim is to redirect the woke hostility of her peer group into more political engagement. It's Tiana's desire to remove the blasé attitude towards the institutions of good governance, and Tiana believes this must start with the education system. She strongly believes if we continue to allow encroaching liberalism to pervade the collective consciousness, there'll be no civilization to save at the end of it. So there we go, Tiana, that's your bio. And you and I met earlier this year at the Great Awakening conference that Charlie Ward held. And it was just so lovely to meet you. And I was thrilled to meet you because I was a big fan of yours. I listened to all your podcast interviews with Charlie, and I love how you always seem to ask the questions that I was thinking. So, it was lovely to meet you, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And Becky, honestly, when I met you at the conference, because my mother wasn't there, no one was there, and it was the first time that I was doing something so big. It was so lovely to have such a motherly presence, and thank you so much. I think you made that experience so much more elevated for me, and I was so much more comfortable because I remember speaking to you backstage for a while, and it was just so comforting. And Simon was lovely as well, so thank you for that. I'm so glad to be on here talking to you guys today.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. So, Chris, do you want to introduce the topic we're going to talk about?
Absolutely. Tiana, welcome, and a big welcome to all of our listeners as well. So there's several topics that we could cover today. And before we get started, though, Tiana, I wanted to say your introduction is very interesting and very inspiring. And I was wondering, what got you started down this path? What got you interested in politics and helping people, especially a younger generation, learn the truth and about good government and education and so forth?
I think, honestly, like everyone, I was stuck at home the past 2 years. I mean, during I don't want to say the word because I think this is going on YouTube, but we were all stuck at home when lockdown started, and there was only so much binge watching on Netflix you could do. And I was exhausted of every topic of gossip with my friends and just news and chatting on the phone. And I started just doing a lot of meditation anyway at that time. So I had a lot of serious just time to reflect and a lot of time to go soul searching. And I just felt like really in my soul, I felt something wasn't right. And because I studied biomedicine for 2 years, I was able to really do a lot of research about the virus. And then I started seeing on the mainstream news the constant demonizing of President Trump. And then I started doing my own bit of digging. And then I realized that, a lot of what the media was saying was completely falsified, and that everything that was happening in our world was just such a deception. And I realized we were being lied to from every single corner of our reality. So I felt this really, honestly, just this very desperate urge to declare to the world. And so I boldly embarked on my own journey. And so, with a lot of passion and fearlessness and a lot of courage, I think I went into battle in my own way. I was about 24 at the time. And so I started small. I started with a Instagram page because the youth of today, it's very hard to grab their attention and to be able to actually keep their attention, because it's the TikTok generation and they've got attention spans like, it's smaller than a goldfish, I think, at this point. Like, it's an 8-second attention span. So I was really struggling to figure out how to make my content in a way that would grab their attention. And I was very interested in coming into British politics, but I was also very wary of this strong woke culture that has very strongly permeated the youth. And there's people like, I'm not sure if you know her, but people like Ash Sarkar, who are way more popular in the conservative side. And I really just wanted to make a difference to my generation and to my peers and to everyone around me, because I felt like everyone was so disenfranchised, and they're so not invested in the future of this country, when in fact they are the future of this country. And I just felt like there was no patriotism left, and people were being lackadaisical and apathetic and destroying this country. And that's where it really started. So it's been quite a long journey since then.
It certainly has. And it's taken you, you know, along your journey, you've been meeting other people and, you know, sharing ideas. And do you feel that you've reached, you know, the youth of today? Sort of, how is it all going?
I think I've reached more of, not the youth not the particular demographic that I would have liked to yet, which is why I very recently started TikTok. And I think through TikTok, it's been much easier to be able to, you know, get across my message to the demographic that I'd like to. Since 2020, I believe the people who followed me and subscribed to me were quite a bit older than me. And I think that's why my words resonated with them more, because my generation really are very woke. And students these days, I think, really need to be encouraged to have knowledge of our political history. And when I spoke to my friends, I felt like there was no pride there, you know, in being part of this nation or remembering our roots. And you know, I really just felt like we all need to focus more on small government, which means in reality, we'll have to get rid of all the parliamentary systems and all these establishments and bureaucrats who are just maintaining this vicious status quo that isn't working for us. And I think I was able to do that through TikTok. I've started very recently, but it's hard. It's hard because I kept getting banned. And every single time I started getting traction, I just got banned. I think I've been banned about 5 times on Instagram, completely banned on Twitter, and now banned on YouTube as well. So considering all the obstacles, it is quite hard to
It
constantly.
certainly is. I mean, Simon's been banned on YouTube now, like forever. And then we get comments from people saying, where are you? You're not doing anything anymore. Well, he is. Just check the website, you know, and he's on Rumble and he's on BitChute. But he's not on YouTube anymore, no. So it is difficult to get the message out when there's definitely still the social media blocking and banning people who are wanting to share the truth and wanting to wake others up. Absolutely. And you know, I can completely agree with you about this woke culture. It's phenomenal how it's really very strong.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from, Becky. I think what happens with school these days is, even my sister who goes to private school, and I mentioned this in the conference, that you think that the reason we chose the school for my sister was because it was the oldest school in England, and we thought it would possibly implement more traditional values and morals, and the curriculum and the syllabus would be much more traditional. And we were so wrong. Like, it's just ridiculous how far the woke culture has reached, you know. And what happens is, when you put your kids in school these days, they belong to the state. You're not in control of your children's minds anymore. You know, they get to indoctrinate them with whatever they want to believe. And a lot of children have problems with their parents now. They have the audacity to actually argue with their parents and tell them that they're wrong. All the things they believe are so archaic, and so just, you know, outdated, I think. And they feel morally superior to be able to say that, because mainstream culture supports what they say. So it's a scary, scary downhill path that we're going into now, I think, with schooling, especially.
Yeah.
It is, absolutely. And I find it interesting in a sad way that, you know, Tiana, you and Becky are in England and I'm in the US, and it's the exact same thing here. And I think there's differences by state. You know, there's some states that are much more woke, but there is a secrecy now that like school boards and schools don't even want to tell parents what they're teaching. And you know, you think, okay, if there's no visibility into it, it's not something that parents are going to like. And it is hard, as I see the generation that are teenagers and young adults now. It feels like that generation has been so indoctrinated. And I love the work that you're doing, Tiana, because now is the time to change that, because I look at all of my grandkids and like, that's not what I want for them. And like Becky, I have young adult kids who have been through that. And luckily, mine are a little bit different. Like they don't really know what's going on, but they're not tied to it. They don't know why, but they're not tied to the narrative that's been given, which is awesome. But I feel like there's either that they've been taught to, you're right, Tiana, to argue and to be like, this is what's right, and your ideas are old and you just don't know what you're talking about. And or I do see in some kids like a hopelessness, right? Because they somehow inside understand that things aren't right, or they're different from what's deep inside or from their soul, and they just kind of check out. So I see a lot of that with the younger generation now too, which is sad and needs to change. And so the other thing, Tiana, that I wanted to mention, you said you haven't quite reached all the young people, but I love that we talked in our last podcast about just taking one small step at a time, and you're doing that, and you are reaching people. And what will happen is the people that you've reached will tell some other people who will tell some other people. And so the ripples of the work that you're doing is probably going out way beyond what you can imagine. So it's beautiful.
It's like the 100th monkey syndrome, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, no, hopefully. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, you guys, but the schools in America and the UK, I've noticed this firsthand because of my sister, but the English curriculums are being very carefully monitored now to include like this plethora of modern books that teach you romantic ideas about Marxism, about communism, about hedonism, and everything to do with these postmodern ideologies. And they've removed classical literature, which is something I mentioned again in the conference, because apparently I remember my sister telling me that she spoke to her head English teacher the other day, and she was asking why they don't get to cover certain books in their A-level syllabus. And she told her basically that these books are written by the patriarchy and they're written by old white men, which is it's quite tragic to hear an English teacher speak that way and to give in to this, progressive way of thinking, which is, it's just such a shame, because I believe classical literature really, for me personally, I grew up in classical literature, and it really teaches you. I saw this through everyone that was reading the same books as me. I saw that it was just so important in being able to cultivate this eternal moral and just intellectual qualities that you need of today. And the youth strongly depend on the internet and social media for their opinions and their view of reality. So, which can sometimes, contain content that promotes just ruthlessness, violence, and greed, and promoting everything that satisfies the human ego. And I think children can't even speak these days. They aren't eloquent anymore. They don't know how to use complex language to express their thoughts and their ideas. And I think reading classical literature represents that tool of intellectual consciousness. And it makes you so much more erudite. And I think, I don't know, it's just really, that's something that I'm very passionate about, bringing back classical literature curriculums in schools. It's just, the words people use these days to express themselves, like, oh, that's sick, dude, or, oh, that's so cool. Like, that's the range of their vocabulary, which is why literature, I think, is so imperative to just be able to mold and go into that psyche of human nature. So I'm very passionate about that. I speak about this a lot. And I think, classical literature also gives us answers to some of the most deep and difficult questions that require a lot of philosophical judgment. And you can find the answers to questions like, what's the meaning of life, if you read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment? And then, stories like Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet and Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. And just, there's so many I can name, but it just teaches us to love even when you feel like the world is against you. And then I think that if you want to know about, the French War, of 1812, I believe. Read Les Miserables. There's so many books that teach you so much history. And that's why people get so swayed by popular opinion and mainstream opinions anymore, because they don't have an idea of history anymore. You know, they don't have an overview, like a holistic way of thinking about things, because they only get that one narrative that's being shoved into their faces through all media platforms. And that's why I think classical literature is very important. Like, there's nothing that can parallel classical literature.
That's so beautifully said, Tiana. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think what's interesting as well, it's not even true actually what that English teacher said. It's all written by, white middle-aged men or whatever, because there were actually quite a lot of women writers who went under male guises. Now, is it George Eliot? I'm not sure, but there are quite a lot. And I know throughout history that there were women writers. And I think, modern film, it definitely has its place. But as you say, classics, they are more philosophical, and people had time to be deeper thinkers. We are absolutely trained in this time in our civilization to not think deeply. Everything is pushed against us to stop us from doing that. As you say, the whole TikTok, everything's got to be just a few seconds long and keep attention spans short. People have been trained out of longer attention spans and thinking about a topic, an issue, a problem, and being able to spend time thinking about it, solving it, and so on. So, I completely agree with you, with that. On another side note, I think not all teachers are like that. They represent the population. My daughter, now this was about 6 or 7 plus years ago when she started her A-levels, she did psychology and sociology, and she came back from her very first day of sociology A-level and said, "Mum, sociology teacher told us about who rules the world and about the cabal and about this, that, and the other." She said, "Everything you've been saying, they agree with it." And I just thought, oh yes. I'm not going to say which school, where, whatever. But what was interesting was there was obviously an awake teacher there who was on the very, very first sociology lesson, made it as fascinating as possible in terms of who really rules the world, and it's the corporations and the mainstream media and why and so on. And that I thought that was an interesting way to start A-level sociology. And I'm sure it probably not every A-level sociology course in the country was along those lines. And again, interestingly, she scored so highly. She got nearly 100% in her A-level when she got that in sociology. And I think it's just because it just sparked an interest in her. And it goes, when someone's teaching with passion and not being dismissive about other things, but actually teaching something with passion and bringing an interest into it, it engages the children. And a lot of about what's taught at school, it is about the teacher, because if a teacher is not connected to the subject, is not interested in teaching, and just doing it because it's a job, then they don't gain the enthusiasm and interest from the pupils. But if a teacher is there and they love what they're doing, even if it's maths, and which we might think is a dry subject, it can be fascinating. And if a teacher's inspiring, then that's what's going to draw the kids to them. So
that's true. I think there really needs to be some measurable change in the way that we're being educated and the way children are being educated, because a lot of what we speak about is to do with wisdom, and this channel is called Sacred Wisdom. And I think wisdom definitely is not the same thing as being intellectual in any regard. Like who's the smartest person in history? Either Albert Einstein, Newton. We all admire geniuses. In fact, I think human intelligence is a gift from God. But there's something even better than intelligence. And I think all religions place a much higher value on wisdom than intelligence, because wisdom has moral benefits. And knowledge is more to do with like facts. Knowledge deals with like questions like, what does this data declare? What do these statistics mean? What are these statistics representing? But the thing is, like, anyone can possess a colossal amount of data. And it's really, I think, maybe, it's even easy for people to impress their friends with facts and having, the mental ability to memorize long passages of literature. Yet, I think all this knowledge alone is of very little benefit. So knowledge alone is of very limited value, in my opinion. And right now, I think the whole education system is geared towards providing data and information. And today's technology has given us like access to virtually unlimited information. We literally live in the age of information. So to what end? What difference does this data make in our daily living? And I think, what really needs to happen is that as we climb this academic ladder, we learn more and more about less and less, which is what I've noticed in school. I mean, when I was in school, it was like that. I think they really, really put value in knowledge, and knowledge is useful, but it doesn't really address the ethical questions of life. It doesn't direct us in terms of what we should do, why we should do things. It only tells us what we can do. And just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean we should be doing it. And so all of this sort of brings me into the concept of the matter of wisdom, and which is, to me, wisdom really means just the moral application of truth. So how do you apply truth in your lives? And I don't know, I think that's what we need to do. I think the school system needs to put much more value on wisdom, and wisdom uses knowledge and understanding to develop, what's the word I'm looking for? Like beauty with truth and goodness. And there's this saying that I really live by, which is knowledge is mere knowledge, right? And understanding is the true wisdom. And knowledge without its application is like water without wetness. So basically, knowledge is like this accumulation of facts and information, but wisdom is like the synthesis of knowledge and the experiences and the insights that deepen one's understandings of relationships and just the meaning of life, I think. So knowledge is more like a tool, and wisdom is like the craft in which, the tool is being used, if that makes sense.
That really does. And another word that comes to mind as well is inspiration. When kids, like, I'm going to refer to things my mum used to say, is like in her day, it was good to let toddlers and babies get a bit bored, because then they would start to, come up with things to do, invent things. Nowadays, parents are sort of encouraged and trained to keep their babies completely active with all sorts of, make sure they do these cognitive things and make sure that they're very good with all these different markers, and are they reaching all these different, are they able to speak on time and walk on time, and, all these different milestones. But if a child is allowed to just have time to breathe, to get bored, to think about things, to try and explore themselves, then I think that gives them a bit of time to sort of connect with their inner divine, inner guidance. And inspiration comes from this. You need to, it's, as you're saying, it's not about, with older people just regurgitating facts. That does nothing. And that's what exams teach children to do, is you've got to regurgitate the facts. And what that does is it shuts out, it's like it fills the headspace so full of facts they've got to remember for different exams, that it shuts out all the ability to just sit and be and connect with the, your inner self, and have the inspiration. And what we humans need that. They need to have the ability to connect with their divine inspiration, because that also helps with wisdom. And we've all got that connection. And if we do that, then it helps us live a good life of being a human being, rather than just, as you say, regurgitating facts. Then you go in to try and get a job, and it's all about getting on the ladder, staying on the ladder, or staying in the rat race or something. There's a real difference what we're encouraged to do and it takes us away what we should be doing.
It's true. I think sorry, Chris, go on.
That's okay. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that both of you said. And Becky, when you were talking about that teacher, I just wanted to uh, go back to how each of us can make such a difference. And Tiana talked about having a desperate urge, and that it takes courage to get out there and to speak your truth, and to speak differently from the narrative or whatever you want to call it, because a lot of times when we do that, then people, label us as whatever, we're a conspiracy theorist, or we don't know what we're talking about. Or Tiana, you said, I often hear, oh, it's old white men who did that, right? That's it. There's a lot of ways to dismiss the truth, and to say that it's dangerous. That's another one that's out there. But it takes true courage, and all of us have it within us. And you don't know how many people you'll touch. And a teacher is a great example, because they're changing the children's lives. And so it's so heartwarming to hear. And I know there's a lot of amazing teachers who are out there who are speaking their truth, and who are helping kids to think, instead of the quick snippets, like, here's what you need to know. Becky and I wrote about that, one of the monthly spiritual topics. That's another thing that's like, you don't need to think, because I'm going to tell you what you need to know. That should be taught as a red warning flag for every child and every adult who's out there. So I just think everyone who's listening, we all have the opportunity to spread the truth, to spread our truth, to think for ourselves, and to help other people do the same. And we touch people even in the grocery store, when we're out and about. It's everywhere we go, we have the opportunity to impact others. And then I also wanted to switch gears here slightly, because Becky, both you and Tiana have talked about wisdom within, looking within. And so Tiana, I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about Sufism, which we've done some research on, and it seems like that's seeking for truth within, and looking to develop a personal experience with God, which is really what spirituality is all about. So could you talk to us a little bit about that?
So I was born in a Muslim family, but I've never really identified with the ritualistic side of Islam. And I think Sufism is actually known to be more of the mystical side of Islam. But I personally think Sufism is not really limited to any religion or any sort of historical period or any sort of culture or society or even a language. I think the tenets of Sufism are born from just the essence of the world's purest teachings, you could say. And I think in contemporary popular culture now, Sufism is mostly referred to as or understood as just philosophical thought. I think especially after they translated the works of Jalaluddin Rumi to English, I think the basic idea of Sufism has received a lot of mainstream attention, more so than ever before. But in my personal opinion, I think in Sufism, the essence of spirituality is really just to know thyself. And knowing oneself has been, in fact, the focus of spiritual teachings for thousands of years. I think in every school of thought, they tell you that how can you know anything when you don't know yourself? So they've tactfully, I think, suppressed the spiritual side of all religions, because they know that, normal base level ritualistic religion doesn't really allow you to ascend. It doesn't really allow you to ascend, and therefore it's not really a threat to all these corrupt systems of power that we have in place right now. And I think knowing thyself has nothing to do with the breadth of knowledge, but has everything to do with the depth of knowledge. And so there's this ancient Chinese quote that says, knowing others, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but knowing others is intelligence, but knowing yourself is true wisdom. Because honestly, self-knowledge takes us beyond this mere information and into that, this elusive thing that we call wisdom. and wisdom that can never really be attained, no matter how intelligent you might be, if we remain ignorant of ourselves. And I think most people, there's this other quote that I used to tell my friends all the time, that figure out who you really are before, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you who you are. And that's what we have in the current society right now. The youth of today don't know who they are. That's why the mainstream media tells them who they are, and they accept it. And, this can, I think, truly to know thyself can be done through meditational practices. And I've seen how meditation personally has helped me, just foster the ability to sit and notice and reflect on my thoughts and feelings without getting too caught up in them, which is such a crucial thing, I think, to have and to cultivate if I ever really want to live in this world as a free, non-reactive, just peaceful presence. And I think one of the biggest teachings of Sufism is to die before you die. And what that basically means is just learn to relinquish your self-identity and your ideological sense of self prior to your actual death. And it basically just involves detaching from this materialistic world and placing a deeper focus on just the primordial and the eternal aspects of our nature. Does that make sense?
Oh, it really does. And it's so interesting, really, because Chris and I have been doing the monthly spiritual topics since November now, and the whole focus has been on self-development and knowing thyself and different ways of how we can do that. And when we started, I didn't have an overall plan, but I just trusted, and I do believe that they were being divinely guided in terms of, I've just trusted that the next month topic that we've chosen has been the right topic for the right time, and it's kind of flowed and developed, and it's all been about a deeper understanding of oneself. And the one that Chris and I are working on at the moment is called Authenticity and the Ego and Our Identity. So that fits very much into what you're talking about, because once again, we're guided in society to identify ourselves either with our profession, especially in the old days, they would say, Jones the carpenter or Mary the midwife, and nowadays we have so many different jobs and professions that we don't particularly attach to that, but we're now more encouraged to identify ourselves, with our color, our nationality, our sex or sexuality or gender identity, and a whole host of other things. And those things don't really define us very well, but they definitely divide people up into different groups of people. And there's just so much more, if we're labeling things that are they're not internal aspects of ourselves, they're external expressions. And as a human being, we can express ourselves in many different ways throughout one lifetime, and we shouldn't have to be labeled by one or two of those expressions. We are so much more than that. Chris, did you want to add some of this, because this is something that we're both thinking about a lot at the moment with creating that monthly spiritual topic?
Yeah,
I think Becky, sorry, I just want to quickly interrupt and say that point that you brought up about I think, have you noticed how there's this just very, very strong encouragement of diversity in every aspect of society? We're constantly being told that, we need more diversity in every realm of society now, even in TV shows, entertainment, just in general, even your friend group has to be diverse. And I feel like this is such a careful social engineering of our minds, in terms of they want us to look different. They want everyone to look different, but they don't want any diversity of thought.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
They want us to think the same, but all look different. Whereas in actual fact, you could have a room full of, as you say, middle-aged white men, and they are all wildly diverse because they're all unique individual souls. So we're focusing on the wrong thing. I'm saying white middle-class men because that's kind of the part of humanity that's been vilified the most as being the least desirable desirable nowadays, you know.
Yeah.
But we are all who we are, and if we make that journey into finding out who and what we are, the divine part of ourselves, as well as the, you know, the physical. And I always sort of split it up into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, because we have these four bodies that are all connected, and it's all different aspects of ourselves.
Right.
And if we got to know more about ourselves as individual human beings, and how we actually connect and relate to others, and the inner work, understanding that if we do inner work on ourselves, it actually affects other people around us and can affect other people the other side of the world through the 100 monkey effect, because we are all connected. Our energy fields are all connected through our heart centers.
Absolutely.
And this is the kind of thing that they, you know, we're encouraged not to know about.
Absolutely. I wanted to share, Tiana had mentioned Rumi, who is my favorite poet, and he has so many beautiful poems. So I did some research on him before this talk, and he is actually the best-selling poet in the US right now, and in many other countries too. And that just made me realize, you know, he talks about the things that we've talked about here, about looking within, about finding God within, about the importance of knowing yourself. And I was going to read a quote by him. It's something similar to what both of you just said, but I love this one. It says, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. I just think that's so beautiful and so true and thought-provoking.
It really is. My goodness. I remember mentioning that, you know, I spoke about how all religions have this outer ceremonial part, right? Which is important because it brings society together. And it's like the opium of the masses and keeps us emotionally grounded. I just wanted to mention this point. But I think like you said, Becky, as well, like the soul also needs fulfillment. And food for the soul, I think, comes from meditation. I think schools need to teach you how to meditate, to be really honest. I think I just our reasons for being here are not really firm. And then we don't really, it's not like a clear answer on a multiple choice test, but more like an ongoing essay question that we're just writing throughout our lives. And I personally started meditation after I was given a few practices by a family friend. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that in Sufism, I found a very simple and practical method that answered the primordial questions about our mortality and about life after death and our soul's destiny. And one day, I mean, I'd love to write a book like of poems like Rumi, but probably will not be as eloquent, but Rumi is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I was born in quite a religious family, you know, I just could never identify with all the rules and regulations of it. And for the longest time, I really genuinely believed that God would punish me with the fire of hell if I didn't follow these rituals because he loves me. And I just thought that was so inverted and so strange. And I couldn't make sense of it logically as a child. And so sadly, it's the spiritual part, I think, that the deep state has removed from all religions. And so, you know, all that we have left now is just the form and function side of organized religion. And that becomes very, very easy to politicize. And spirituality really has nothing to do with religion, does it? Like, it's more to do with pure love of the creator and for his creation and all his creation. So meditation for me, I think, was that vehicle for spiritual ascension in Sufism. And no one can really teach you that, I think. It really does come from within yourself.
I was just about to say, can you talk us through the steps of how you meditate, or a simple way, so that you know, people listening to us, you know, an idea and maybe try it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know we briefly spoke about this, but I think it's hard. Like, I think I wish meditation was like a prerequisite at school, but people could really just, you know, unlock its true power if they have experience of it in their early years, I think, because there are really just 3 types of meditation. I might be wrong, I'm not sure, but this is what I've learned. One is just a simple meditation that brings good health and a sense of well-being and, freedom from your anxiety and your stresses. It just like, it makes you more emotionally equipped to handle the trials and tribulations of life. And for this stage, I think the brain waves go down to the alpha level of frequency. The second level of meditation is the type of contemplation where you can solve problems and you can help others, such as with their health issues, if you want, or if you want like good academic results for your exams. So it's more about like remote influencing your reality through the quantum field. So it's about manifesting your desires and benefiting others and healing others. And this means you have to go down into the alpha and then the theta level brainwave. The third level of meditation is what I think really transforms you. And it's more like in the mystical realm of the occult, which, by the way, I think a lot of people believe that the word occult has its root in, I don't know what they think it means. A lot of people think that's a evil meaning, but it just means occultus in Latin. Right. It just means hidden or like secret.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I practice the third level of meditation most of my life. And I think that's the level of meditation that brings you enlightenment. And this requires like a lot of just going deep into almost delta brainwaves. And delta brainwaves only really occur when you're asleep. But for this, I think it's ideal to have a spiritual guide, because only he can customize, if we're talking about Sufism, only he can customize that Sufi path for you. But I think in going down to delta levels of meditation, you're actually tapping deep within yourself where God resides. That's like the most inner core of your being. And when you connect there with God, I don't know, I think you just receive these beautiful glimpses of just pure love and non-dualism. Because, separation is really an illusion. Our perceived separation from everything is just an illusion. And I think it's almost like a mushroom trip, like the feeling you get of being just at one with everything, and that experience of love that is beyond any type of human love, like the bliss of divine love. And I think, I don't know, in Sufism, the essence of the teachings really is that life is a scale upon which is measured the depth of a man's soul. So there really are 3 levels of meditation. I think you can do it all by yourself, but it does require a lot of practice and a lot of perseverance, because I make my sisters meditate, and they're both younger than me, but they get really frustrated. But they say things like, we're just not as good as you. We can't sit there for as long as you do. But I couldn't sit there when I was 18. It took me years to learn to fall in love with it. And so it takes time, but it really is rewarding once you get there.
Absolutely. And I would love to weigh in on meditation too. So I studied meditation at the Chopra Center, and actually ultimately became, I'm a Chopra Center primordial sound meditation, which is a beautiful meditation process. It's a mantra-based meditation where you receive a meditation that is associated with the sound the universe made at the time of your birth. So I practiced that meditation and taught that meditation for many years. There are mantra-based meditations. A lot of people meditate using their breath. But what I found over time for me, and everyone is different, but for the most part, when I meditate now, it's outside, just sitting under a tree. And most people think meditation is sitting cross-legged and, having a mantra or working with your breath. But you can be at any place. You can be sitting on your couch. You can sit on your porch. I know people who meditate riding a lawnmower or riding a tractor through a big field. Yeah. Really, what I'd like to say about meditation and to get to the benefits of meditation, it's really trying to quiet your mind, so to let your thoughts go. And when I first started meditating, that was the hardest part, because we all have 8 bazillion thoughts, right? And they're going to come. And if you try to make them go away, they're going to come even more. And so I have used processes like thinking of a thought, like a leaf falling off a tree, and you just kind of watch it fall away. Or it could be a leaf in a pond, and you kind of just watch it float away. And if that thought's important, it will come back when you're done. Yeah. And so now my meditation has evolved and I say evolve for me just into something that's a little bit different, and that's a little bit more relaxed. And sometimes when I'm meditating, it's more of a connection with my guides and with God. And other times it's just, a deep silence but oftentimes when I'm done, I get an inspired idea. And Becky and I laugh sometimes when we're writing the monthly spiritual topic, and Becky always gets these downloads, which is awesome. But I get my thoughts. I tell her, oh, I got this in the fields, like walking in the fields out in nature with trees. And so I just wanted to, I think people get intimidated by the word meditation, and it just really is when you're starting out. I know Tiana has talked about the deeper levels, and absolutely, when you go deeper and deeper, you gain more knowledge. But when you're starting out, just try to think of a thought as like a leaf or a cloud passing by or whatever. And eventually you'll find the right way to meditate for you.
Or just become a witness to your thoughts. I think we really get deluded into the fact that we think our thoughts are us. But your thoughts are not you. Just sit there and observe them. Observe them like a slideshow, and you'll realize that if you don't give in to each thought, it really quickly subsides. Every thought is replaced by another thought every 3 seconds. So I think the first level of meditation really is that just learn to quiet your mind. And like you said, Chris, it was just silence at times, but silence is the language of God, right? And every other language, every other noise, every other sound is merely just poor translation of God's language. So I think, the whole idea of meditating with special practices is to activate the pineal gland, which sees into these higher dimensions and works like a direct link to God. It's literally like the gateway to God. And there's a reason that it looks like a pine. That's why it's called the pineal. But the pineal gland is also what releases melatonin for sleep. So to fall asleep, you obviously need to be in a room with total darkness. And it's then that when the electromagnetic charge occurs and gives you consciousness, this access to all these space-time dimensions. So I think that's why when you dream, it literally is because there's activity in your pineal gland to access other dimensions where your spirit body is traveling. So it's only activated when the light goes out. And everyone can activate their pineal gland. And it's not really exclusive to spiritual gurus and monks. And the beauty of Sufism, I think, is that you don't have to go and sit under a tree in the forest or up in the mountain for years, giving up everyday life and the material world. I think the beauty of becoming a spiritually enlightened person in Sufism is that you do everything. You live, you marry, you have children, you have a career, you live amongst your friends and family. But, you just have that inner, a lot of people have the guidance of a teacher for their spiritual evolution, but it really just is so easy in terms of Sufism. It doesn't tell you to alienate everything that you desire in this world, so that, when you're ready to leave this world, you really are ready to unite with the Creator. And I think the pineal gland really is like an eye physiologically, as there are obviously rods and cones and retinal tissue. But I talk about the pineal gland a lot because I think it's very interesting. When Jesus said, right, that the light of the body is the eye. He didn't say eyes. And if your eye be single, your whole body will be full of light, right? I think he was talking about the pineal gland, that when you activate the pineal gland, you get the light body. And then you have reached enlightenment per se, one stage of enlightenment, and can leave this karmic cycle of this present planet and never have to constantly be reincarnated. But man, reincarnation is a completely other topic that we can get into sometime. It's a trap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to talk about reincarnation at some point, because I think it's a very valid and valuable topic to discuss. It can be quite controversial, but I think it was, it used to be discussed within the Bible before it was banned from that. But I was just thinking about my own experiences of meditation as well. When I was I think I must have been about 17, my mum gave me a book on yoga. I think it's Richard Hittleman's book of yoga. Don't know if he's a good guy, bad guy, I have no idea. But I loved this book of yoga, and it taught you through, I think it was a 28-day cycle of learning new yoga moves. And after you've done that, there's 3 different sets of yoga move patterns that you do, every 3-day cycle. So you just keep, you spend 40 minutes or so a day doing these yoga moves. And I just really got into it. And I remember she gave it to me because I'd been involved in an accident. It's a really weird freak accident where I was in what was Yugoslavia at the time, just finishing off saying goodbye to some friends on a skiing trip. And there was a rock avalanche because the weather had been really bad. And this big granite boulder came down and just crashed by me. And I just turned in time for it to basically crush my leg rather than the rest of me. So it's a bit of a miracle. But cut a long story short, it took me a long time to recover physically from that. And as part of my recovery, Mum said, "Oh, I've got this book. Why don't you learn yoga so you can build up your strength?" And so I did. And part of that was learning to meditate, doing different meditation practices. And one was just focusing on the flame. So I did used to do that. But thinking about it, and it's interesting because I think I found that a bit hard. I mean, I could do it, but I found it a bit false and a bit hard. There was other ways of doing it where you sort of breathe in through the nose and you breathe out. So it's focusing on the breath and, different nostrils open and close and so on. But thinking about it throughout my childhood, I really, really had the ability to just completely go within to the point I could tune absolutely everything out. And it wasn't a particularly sociable characteristic because it would happen quite a lot at school where I would absolutely completely zone out. And I do remember one memorable time where I was in class 6 and what had happened was we were supposed to be clearing up, and class 6 is like, I was about 10 years old. We were all supposed to be clearing up after one activity. And at some point during my clearing up, I was standing by the window and I saw a robin, a little bird outside the window, jumping about on the grass and pecking away at little bits of seeds. And I was watching that robin. And then before I knew it, I was kind of the robin pecking around at the seeds and looking around. Then the next thing I know is being tapped on the shoulder and a very, very angry irate teacher shouting at me. The whole class was silent. "What do you think you're doing?" And I didn't know what I'd missed what had happened in the class. So I just said, "I'm just looking at the robin over there." And he said, "You should be concentrating on." Anyway, I got told off. I got really told off. But what had happened was it was completely, become dissociated from my own self, my own body, and what I was supposed to be focusing on. So I think, perhaps it's a good idea to manage that so you don't sort of start, jumping off and doing other things. But that, I guess, is another form. I don't know if you wouldn't call that meditation as such, but it's another form of focusing on something, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's a beautiful example, Becky. And I know a couple of other people who can do that. And I think being able to just go that deeply within without, like, most of us need to use breath or mantra or, whatever, but to be able to do that naturally, that's beautiful. And that's like the deep level that Tiana was talking about, and just being able to adjust it to go there. I think that's amazing and beautiful. And we're all different, and how it happens and how it works for all of us is different. And it's another thing where no one, should feel the need to, okay, I have to do it this way. Like, play around with different ways and see, and ask for help and see what works and what comes naturally for you. Like, I love that. I think that's beautiful. And I agree with Tiana, though. It should be taught in schools, even basic, like, breath work and yoga, the history of yoga and the philosophies behind yoga. It's not just a physical practice. Like, there is such beauty and such wisdom in that. Like, if all of those things were taught in schools, then people children would come up with their own way to do that, and their own way to connect within and to connect with God.
So true.
I also wanted to mention, Tiana said something very simple and I think very profound, and that's, you are not your thoughts. And probably most people listening to this already know that, but I want to tie it together to a couple of other things that we were talking about, like authenticity, because with Tiana, what you were saying, just observe your thoughts, like that's another great, I think it's a meditative type of practice, because when you start observing your thoughts and a thought comes in and then you think, well, where did that thought come from? Is that really me? Or is that something that I've been told? And who told me that? And is it really true? Is it true to me? And when you start looking at your thoughts that way and asking questions, then it does really help you to do some of that inner work. And it's also very enlightening, because you can know, back to knowledge, right? You can know, okay, I'm not my thoughts. But having the wisdom when really looking at it and peeling it apart can take you much deeper. And it's a really fun and amazing exercise to do.
That's true. I think that's what happened. I think the mind is really just a tool to be directed according to one's wishes. And an out of control mind is just a mind that has become your master instead of your slave, right? Instead of your servant. Or it's just both an incredibly waste of energy, as well as being potentially damaging, I think, and limiting your influence on your own life. So it's very important to realize that your thoughts are not you. And I think everyone has this. There's a common, very, very common misidentification of the self, or the real you, with the body and the mind. And obviously, certainly these are faculties that we possess, but they're not who we are. And, this can be seen, I think, practically just by the fact that we're capable of observing our body and our thoughts from an external perspective. And if you are them and they are you, then who is doing the watching, almost? Like, so it's interesting. I think it's really good idea to learn to commit to bringing all thoughts into just conscious awareness. And we're just so busy usually, aren't we, with external actions, and just always occupied, that we barely ever spare little time or energy to watching our thoughts and seeing exactly where they come from. It's because it's that lack of attention and care that allows them to go from becoming a humble servant to our master, the master of our lives. So I think it really is essential practice to just realize that you can try to, simply resolve all the problems in life just by becoming intensely aware of it. So yeah, I think that's a great practice to start with.
I'm thinking, because we've been chatting away for well over an hour, and it feels to me like that might be a good place to start to wrap up, because it's sort of very profound, and I feel we've almost come full circle, because I'm tempted to sort of take us back to talking about how distracted we are in everyday life, and that's almost where we started. So Tiana, it's been so lovely having you join us today, and I'm actually hoping that you'll join us again and we can delve into other topics. I would like to delve into reincarnation and other spiritual topics. And
absolutely. I'm free whenever you need me. Thank you so much for having me, Becky and Chris. It was lovely speaking to you both.
Thank you, Tiana, and thank you to all of our listeners.